Thank you to those of you joining us on the GBN Television Facebook page, the Grenada Broadcasting Network's YouTube channel, the website www.gbn.gd, those of you watching on GBN TV, channel 7, 11 and 20, and the folks listening to Classic 105.5, 105.9, Hot 98.5, 98.7. We thank each and every one of you for joining us. This morning we have as our virtual guest Dr. Stephen Fletcher. He is a management consultant, and the topic on the forefront this morning is the current state of the cocoa and nutmeg industries and the impending merger as proposed by government not too long ago. So we welcome Dr. Fletcher for joining us this morning on this topical issue. Good morning, Doc.
Hi, good morning, Blossom, and morning to everyone.
Thank you.
Listeners, viewers, everyone in social media. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you for accommodating us this morning. Appreciate it. We're going to get right into the discussion this morning. Don't want to waste time. The cocoa and nutmeg industries have been in the news or in public discussion for the past few weeks following what they say is the leaking of a document announcing that the associations would be merged. Let's first start with you being one of the, what I would call, not just a consultant, but somebody who has been deep inside or deeply involved with the industries. How far do you think both industries have come over the past few years of their existence and their intention to further develop and advance the nutmeg and cocoa industries in Grenada?
Well, before I answer the question, Blossom, let me ask everyone listening to this program to take a deep breath, to remove a lot of the emotionalism that is attached to this most important issue, and for us to develop a very non-partisan approach in addressing one of Grenada's single most economic sector, all right? So we need to step back a little bit. And what I hope to do this morning is to put information out there in the public space that would allow persons to take a rational approach towards this proposal for merger and liberalization of the cocoa and nutmeg sectors. To the question, Blossom, the GCNA in particular was formed as an organization in 1947, but the sector operated much longer before that. In fact, my data indicated, or the data that I have, indicated that nutmeg exports from Grenada started way back in 1919. So we have had a long history of an industry that has been engaged in the production and export of nutmegs. And during all those years, the financial performance of the industries has been one of ups and downs, mountain troughs, valleys, and so forth. The cocoa came about as a merged organization much later, but nonetheless, it also had this mixed sort of performance. So the industries have done a pretty good job from the origin. Remember, and we must always put that in context when we are discussing this issue. What was the reason for the formation of the GCNA and Cocoa Association? We must contextualize this and understand that the fundamental reason for the 1947 Act was, among other things, to protect the small and the poor and the vulnerable nutmeg producers. It was a coalition between the government of the day, the administration of the day, and the nutmeg farmers to put in place a cooperative that will provide for three fundamental things. One is to ensure that there is organization to the industry, that the haggling that went on between exporters and producers would stop, because you had people bargaining, and who had the greatest bargaining power would influence price. And prior to 1947, the trend towards pricing was generally downward pressure on pricing. By the way, that has not changed fundamentally since the formation of the GCNA. The second objective of the GCNA in particular was to ensure that more of the profits that is generated from this sector is plowed back into the industry, and the form that took is the form of bonus. So the bonus payment is really a way for compensating the farmers and having more of these monies returning into the remaining on the island. And the third critical objective was to have an organized export arm, centrally controlled, centrally driven, so that Grenada nutmegs could take its rightful place on the international market. And that is important to understand the reason and the rationale for it, of which the government of the day and the farmers always work in partnership. In fact, there's evidence to suggest that at the time, the government, in fact, made a financial contribution of approximately $650 for the initial startup capital of the GCNA. But, Ms. Welsh, there's a critical background factor that I want to put in this morning. And this could have implications for quality going forward. You know, in 1933, so that was something as 14 years before GCNA was eventually formed, the Grenada Agricultural Association wrote to the British government, asking the British government to intervene with the Dutch counterpart and to create a mechanism to allow Grenadian nutmegs to fetch a higher price on the European market. Very important. The response of the then British authorities was to provide a very long explanation to the Grenada Agricultural Association at the time, but pointing out, among other things, the fact that we needed to organize our exports and provide better quality of nutmegs to the UK housewives. Now, that was done. We continue to produce cocoa and nutmeg up to today, fundamentally in the same fashion. In terms of progress made, in the case of nutmeg, there has been attempts to get into value-added products by the association itself by means of the nutmeg oil distillation. In fact, Grenada was exporting nutmeg oil as way back as 1961-62. But we failed to get into the marketplace where the consumer consumed the products that we have. And therefore, for both cocoa and nutmeg, these are commodities that are subject to the vagaries of the price market. We are not price makers. We are price takers. The significant buyers out there, they are the ones that really determine the price. And therefore, we fall for it as commodity producers. Of course, we have to accept it. But what we failed to do was, as a GCNA and others, should get to the value added end. Cocoa, however, most recently has been quite different. Cocoa has taken a root and is an extremely important structure that they have developed, which should be looked at, in which when they went value added, making the chocolates and so on. But you know what they did? They partnered and they created a joint venture with the cocoa farmers owning assets, right, and shares in that joint venture. On the other hand, the GCNA has failed to make such headway. However, there are many private companies in Grenada, like Mr. Noel, Mrs. Noel, and so forth, who have been involved in the production of many value-added products or originated from nutmegs. So, in summary to the question, the GCNA has in fact done well on its original mandate to protect small farmers. The government of the day did very well to allow for a legislative monopoly, to use that word, but I say a legislative controller of export and organization and branding of our nutmegs. That has done well. Where I think the GCNA in particular has not done very well, and they themselves have recognized it, is getting into the value-added aspect of this industry. And that's where the challenge lies. And GCNA is not on its own globally, Mrs. Welsh, because it is a characteristics of global commodity trading companies. Part of the thing that I believe that was lacking is the inability of successive governments, save and except in times of, I would say, the George Bruzan administration, where he was very active in getting European Union funding for the establishment of the distillation plant, and during the revolution in which there was a plan for value added. But government as government, responsible for the macro management of the economy, ought to have directed GCNA in a much more decisive way in getting and provide support, not just direct, but also provide some support and augment resources for getting into the value added aspect of the industry.
What sort of resources do you think needed to be made available for the GCNA to be able to accomplish what it set out to accomplish, especially when it comes to value added? What was missing?
In terms of what is required, I will suggest, broadly speaking, and because of time, of course, there are two fundamental things that were required and still required. One is that we need an injection of serious capital into the GCNE to get it into that direction. The investment in plant and equipment for value-added products, it's extremely high. It's expensive. So we need to go down that route. And the other, so this is the main financial. The other issue is the human resources, the human capital that is required to drive the GCNE into that direction as well. People and persons in management, having a fully staffed management team, right? Because the truth is that at the moment, the GCNA, neither the Cocoa Association, has really a full management team staffed by the necessary persons. Could you imagine, for example, the GCNA as well as Cocoa Association, a marketing organization of 73 years in the case of Nutmeg, they have no marketing department? I mean, this is unbelievable, right? The capital requirement is something that we have seen that GCNA really cannot generate on its own, because GCNA distributes, as well as cocoa, 80% of export earnings goes back to the farmer. Therefore, have very little space for retained earnings that can be used for those kinds of projects. So therefore, GCNA, in my humble opinion, as a suggestion to them, should really look at changing the business model. While not getting rid of the cooperatives, maintaining the cooperative structures currently exist, but opening up to what my studies have led me to really conclude, something called the new generation cooperative. Not a private sector corporation, but a cooperative that allows for the attraction of private sector capital that will help the GCNE and propel it into the value-added stream of it. And the Cocoa Association provides a very good example, local example of what could be done.
According to the officials, government officials, the merger is important now because the associations are not profitable. Do you concur with that statement? Do you agree that's the rationale for the merger, or do you have another thought in mind?
I will take 3 minutes on this question, because I think it's important as well that I address not just this issue that you have raised, but other issues that are out there in the public space as to the rationale for the liberalization of the industry. Let me say, liberalization, privatizing the nutmeg industry and the cocoa industry, I will surmise, will not yield any significant benefits to the farmers at this time, especially the guy who has the ability to sell 5 pounds and 20 pounds of nutmegs, right? As to the profitability question, there is an issue there, Blossom, and we must not, and GCNA must acknowledge that there is an issue, because the financial model or the performance model that we judge GCNA by is by financial performance. That I would challenge. I really do not think that in the same case as Liat, for example, that the financial profitability of the associations are not the only measures we should use. But there is an issue, and one of the fundamental reasons is this. The GCNA, as I said before, is they sell a commodity nutmeg. It is subjected to the boom and bust of global prices. They cannot set prices. They are price takers. But fundamentally, what GCNA has done over the years, as a means of protecting the small farmers, keeping them motivated, keeping the psychology of the farmer and the psychology of Grenada engage in nutmeg production is sometimes to pay them at a price higher than what they are getting on the international market, right? No industry can suppose that over an extended period. So that's been one of the problems. The other issue is this: having temporary cash flow problems is not unique to the GCNA. It is not unique to cooperatives. All businesses, including some of the largest corporations in this world, may I say, do have from time to time cash flow issues. The stocks and shares of companies like Apple and IBM and General Motors and so on are sometimes dictated by their income, right, and forecasted revenues and profitability. When that happens, the GCNA in the past, as I know, has gone to the bank and asked for an overdraft from the bank, or they have gone to the other major stakeholder, which is government, because let us not forget, the government is a major shareholder in the GCNA. GCNA was formed out of a partnership of government and farmers. So the government of the day and the farmers have a responsibility to look at this industry and in fact to provide for its continuance. The critical question for us: how many times in the 73-year history of the GCNA has the organization had to seek out assistance of its shareholders, right? So there has been this issue of financial performance, and yes, there are times they haven't performed profitable, but is that the only measure we should use? As a critical socioeconomic institution in Grenada, Carriacou, and Petit Martinique, I don't think finance is enough. But let me hasten to add as well that the only time it seems that successive governments have looked at creating amalgamation, a merger with the GCNA and COCO, is when there is a financial problem, as happened in the 1990s, for example. But you know what the approach was? The approach was to say, let us rationalize the resources of these industries. And amalgamation was thought of, and the Canadian International Development Agency developed a plan that would have led to the amalgamation. But fundamentally, it was farmer-led. It was not privatization. And it was not privatization and liberalization of the industries. It was a mechanism to help improve performance. So I think we still have the room space to focus on performance. Liberalization would not solve the performance problem that the farmers are facing, right? Privatization will not face it, will not solve it rather. My argument, after I have studied the literature on a number of agricultural cooperatives that have been privatized and commodity boards, the farmers did not benefit as much as anticipated. And let me hasten to add, on this issue, there are a number of things that were said about the farmers. One of the arguments that has been put forward is that the farmers cannot run their own business. That is not true. Who are the farmers? The farmers in the members of the GCNA is a heterogeneous group of persons that are involved, most of them, in diverse businesses. Some of these landowning persons manages major businesses in this country, medium and large businesses. They have kept the GCNA going for 73 years. We have doctors, medical doctors, we have professors that are involved in the GCNA. We have effective managers, both in the private and public sector, that are involved in the GCNA. And the argument is that the GCNA cannot manage it, the farmers cannot manage its business. I do not buy that argument. The other argument that's been put forward is that the farmers will finally own the assets of the GCNA and have shares in it. This is a question or an issue that requires some serious discussions on. And I will put it that way. In 1990, I have a report here that deals with the capitalization of assets of the Grenada Cooperative Nutmeg Association. That has been on the table for a while. So it was a mechanism to finally offer paper shares, authorized paper shares to the farmers so that they can say, yes, I own this thing and this is my shareholding. So the issue of capitalization and so on could take place in the absence of a merger. and liberalization. We don't need that to solve this problem. But also importantly, farmers' contribution to the GCNA and cocoa is premised, Mrs. Welsh, on this fundamental fact. The farmers contributed what would be considered in the private sector as sweat capital to the GCNA through patronage. In other words, through the number of times that they have sold their nutmegs to the GCNA, of which the GCNA use, export, generate income, retain some, pay administrative expenses, and pay out to the farmers. This sweat capital is lying in that association and should be extracted for the good of the individual farmers. The farmers have contributed, and in fact, successive studies, consultancies on the GCNA have come up with various modeling options to provide for the share ownership of the GCNA without privatization, without liberalization. As I said before, the new generation cooperative model offers an opportunity for GCNA to expand its current stakeholders, capitalize the industries, in other words, do a shareholding analysis and issue shares to the farmers and to the private sector that I would strongly suggest get involved in this industry. The model that exists now cannot continue. That is a reality. And this is one thing that this proposal by government has brought to the fore, that the model that currently run by the GCNA is not a sustainable model and has to be changed, okay? So I would say that the share ownership issue, we don't need to solve. The value-added issue, we don't need liberalization to solve that problem. It can be done by two fundamental things: government directive, government actions, and the openness of the GCNA to new capital and new human resources. And let me add this final point on this issue, Mrs. Welsh. The United States, Great Britain, all of these developed societies that we're talking about, the great technological and innovative advances that they have made. You know what is not mentioned? Is the role of government. How much government of the United States and so have invested in the technologies that we're now using and thinking it was all private sector. The internet, for example, the internet was a US government development, right? It was used within the military apparatus in the United States to transmit confidential information between NATO member states and within the US military. Today, who's making the money out of the internet? It is a private sector companies, right? That have put layers upon layers of other value-added stuff on it. So government, in my view, has that responsibility to direct the industry. Have we done it sufficiently? Has the government representatives on the board of directors, there are 3 members on each board, have they come with a plan and said, this is where we must take the industry and that is where it has to go? The PRG had a plan, for sure, all right, to move it in that direction. I have not seen or heard of any plan from then by successive governments, right, to move the industry in value added, to farmer ownership, to improving the quality of life of the farm. And let me get rid of another myth that has been spread on the farmers and GCNA. You know, over the years, Blossom, I grew up in nutmegs, and that's one of the reasons I may show passion for it, along with objectivity and intellectual research. I know nutmegs. I know what it means to go and pick up nutmegs, go to the nutmeg pool, sell it, get cash in hand, right? Take it home to my mom, or go down with a grocery list, and then you pop into the shop and you buy the groceries and you take home. This is an important aspect of this discussion. Are we going to remove that from vulnerable farmers, right? Are we going to remove that culture, that form of living? What are we replacing it with? Do we have a strong replacement? I would say let us focus on improving the performance of the GCNA, improving the performance of the Cocoa Association, and we do not need to liberalize markets. Now, I understand the liberalization thing with the IMF and World Bank and the new global thinking, but we don't have to fall into the trap of new global thinking at this time.
On that note, let's take a break and then we're going to come back with the discussion. We're speaking with Dr. Stephen Fletcher on the way forward and the current situation of the Cocoa and Nutmeg Associations. This is To The Point on Classic GBN and Hot 98. We'll be right back.
The following are a list of food items to have on hand amidst COVID-19. Perishables like vegetables, fruits, provisions, and eggs. You are advised to stock perishable items to last up to 2 weeks. Non-perishable items including dry goods like cereals, flour, cornmeal, oats, rice, pasta, nuts and nut butters like peanut butter, crackers, canned or frozen meats, ready-to-eat canned meats, powdered or canned milk, dried peas and beans, canned fruits in natural juices, 100% canned fruit juices, and canned vegetables. You can stock non-perishable food items to last up to 1 month. Store bottled or clean drinking water, 1 gallon or more per day per person. If you suffer from a medical condition, have prescribed medications on hand. A message from the Grenada Food and Nutrition Council as we battle COVID-19. The Grenada Food and Nutrition Council remind you to boost your immune system and give yourself a fighting chance against COVID-19. Consume foods that are rich in vitamin C, like fruits and vegetables. For example, oranges, grapefruit, mandarin, lemon, spinach, cabbage, and tomatoes. Vitamin B6 and folic acid that is found in chicken, turkey, fish, grain foods like oats, bread, local provisions, dry beans, and peas. Another immune system booster is vitamin E, found in nuts, corn, sunflower or canola oils, and leafy vegetables like spinach, broccoli, and kale. Iron, zinc, and vitamin D are also important to strengthen your immunity. So try foods like lean meats, eggs, lentils, mackerel, tuna, and jacks. Our local spices, ginger, clove, and turmeric, among others, can help decrease inflammation and support the immune system. Remember to practice safe food handling. A message from the Grenada Food and Nutrition Council, reminding you that a strong immune system is one of the best ways to fight COVID-19.
When the devil want to breathe, we have to turn it off. There Jah goes again. He took me to a higher level, higher up. Oh, Daddy Father blessing me, Oh, Daddy Father,
the world is brighter. I'm so much lighter since you came into my life, Lord. I am not the same.
blessings flowing over here like a fountain. Don't make nobody trick you.
Welcome back to The Point. We are speaking with Dr. Stephen Fletcher on the current state of the Cocoa and Nutmeg Associations following the announcement of the impending, should I say announcement, of the impending merger between both associations. Docs, before the break you were speaking about what needed to be done for the sustainability of both industries. Do you think the merger should happen now, if at all? Or what is the best approach to dealing and tackling the issues to ensure that both associations are profitable on their own and the merger may not be necessary?
Very, very good question, Mrs. Welsh. And I think this is where we need to put some energy and focus. In fact, let me say this. I published this last week a paper on what I call a roadmap, right, for achieving yes or no to merger. These things are processes. It cannot be imposed upon stakeholders. Consistent consultancies have indicated that in order for this to be successful, the stakeholders must be involved and it must be stakeholder-led. Similarly, in the private sector, if a merger is to work between two companies, there has to be coming together of the minds of both companies to agree that yes, we are going to merge, to agree on the rationalization for merger, to agree on the purpose of merger, to agree on the fundamental objectives of the merger, and the processes, the means and ways by which it will be done. So I would say that we need to step back at the moment and put in place a mechanism. And I think I've suggested something like 7 or so steps that should be taken to arrive at a yea or nay. Because at the end of the day, the farmers and other stakeholders of the industry has to be involved and has to be engaged. Remember, and it's important that the GCNA farmers also acknowledge that, as well as the government, that the GCNA is a stakeholder organization, meaning that it's not just about the farmers and about the government, it's about all of society. Ms. Welch, you know that when nutmeg does well, the country does well financially, not just well financially, we feel good. There's an excitement about nutmeg bonus in December. And if the news goes around that farmers will not be paid a bonus or spirits drop, even those of us who do not sell nutmeg, because we understand the importance. So we have the bankers to take into account. We have the rural communities to take into account, the government. So what we need to do is step back a bit and put in place a process to get to yea or nay, driven by the farmers with the facilitation of government. Government must facilitate the process, right? We cannot say it's an all or nothing, them and us. It is not going to work. The them and us model is not a workable model for Grenada, Carriacou, and Petit Martinique. We must come together and build a team, get to yea or nay, and then proceed thereafter. There might be value to be had in merger. For example, I would like to know, other than that earlier report that was done in 2006, there might have been a case for merger. You see, Blossom, the industries have moved on so much. There have been so many changes in these industries that an argument put forward 10 years ago or 14 years ago for a merger may not be valid today. The organizations, GCN and Cocoa Association, have made certain moves based on those reports. So for example, the Cocoa Association employment, how many persons do they really have, full-time and staff? No more than 9, Blossom. The Nutmeg Association also about 9 to 11 full-time staff members. They own no real vehicles other than buildings. They do not have much assets. What are you rationalizing? Sending people home? Okay, you send the staff home, you says that for whatever reason you may want to dispose of them. Then what happens? There's compensation to be paid. Who's going to carry that cost? So there are issues that we have to take into account, and we need deep assessment to be done, deep evaluation, and we need to come up with a serious financial model and a business model to make sure that these industries remain viable and improve their performance.
Something that I've been curious about, does the final say on whether the merger happens or not come from government? Let's say the board of directors for both associations, the nutmeg and cocoa farmers, all disagree. But can government decide we're going ahead with this merger, whether you like it or not?
Well, you know, it is probably foreseeable, but I hope not. I hope that the government, in its wisdom, would consider all of Grenada, and that we will move in this process in a harmonious way with collective agreement, with collective support, because Blossom, this issue has the potential to further fragment our small society. It has the potential in it, a time bomb, for further segregating our communities into haves and have-nots. It has the potential to deepen poverty in rural communities. And I hope in the government's wisdom, and I know there are some good people within the whole bureaucracy that will really influence, all right, a more collective and uniform approach towards this merger. It was done in the past. Blossom, in 1993, when the CEDA report was done and recommended the merger of Cocoa and Nutmeg Association, it was fundamentally farmer-driven. The government of the day facilitated the study, they facilitated the actual, discussions, but left to the farmers to decide, by and large, how to drive the process. Now, I hear the argument that's also been put forward that the government must take the driver's seat, get into the driver's seat, and drive the process. I agree with some of that, but I would say I'm a stakeholder ideologue. I believe that persons that are involved in a situation that affects and who are affected by a situation or a decision should be involved in the process. And I pray and hope that the government do not seek to take a unilateral decision on this very, very important issue.
At this point in the program, we are going to open the platform for our viewers and listeners who may have questions for Dr. Fletcher. You can call the landline 435-2041. You can also message the WhatsApp. It's also 435-2041. Please, only written messages on the WhatsApp. You can also participate by posting your comments, questions, queries, concerns on the GBN Television Facebook page or the Grenada Broadcasting Network's YouTube channel. Let's go to our first caller. Good morning. Good morning.
Good morning to you, Ms. Blossom. And
good morning
to the gentleman. Ms. Blossom, let me see, that is the first and best approach that I've heard to the merger. I want to repeat it again. That is the best and first approach that I've heard to the merger. The best, coming from this gentleman. What he said is as true as the gospel. Government definitely have to hold a leading role, but must not be the dominant person in the merger. And there is need for both associations to merge. There is need for both of the associations to merge, but the stakeholders, which is the farmers and the government, have to be able to see eye to eye on that. And the question that the gentleman asked is the very same question I'm asking. Who will compensate? Because you will have loss of employment, you have to capitalize on the ownership of the assets, and we have to know who is going to be responsible for that. So the approach now, I think, is the best. It is needed. There is room and there is need to reorganize cocoa and nutmeg as one entity, but it has to be done properly. You cannot leave out the farmers. And I'm hoping that all and sundry understand that the best possible way. But I think Mr. Fletcher's idea is the best, and that should be published. I hope that, Ms. Blossom, if you could tape what was said there by the gentleman so that it can be used as a platform. Thank you.
Thank you very much, caller. The program is recorded and can be seen on our Facebook page, the YouTube channel, as well as the website. Dr. Fletcher, any responses to what the caller said?
I did not hear all that said clearly, but I think I got the mainstream. I think he was making the valuable point that that the government cannot dominate this process and need to take everybody on board and have consultation, meaningful, and I would say meaningful consultation. And to his point, Blossom, that the other stakeholders in the sector, I think it's important to engage them. The commercial sector, for example, the banking sector, the farmers and GCNE over the years has established very critical networks. There is a particular bank in St. George's where it was initiated by nutmeg farmers. There are a couple of nutmeg farmers who put up the initial capital and who played a significant role in the establishment of the banks. I'm sure that some of these banks continue to look forward towards bonus payments. And one of the actual recommendations going forward, if the current bill is to have its way, there will be no bonus payments. Farmers will have no bonus payments. Farmers virtually will not have a say because the board of directors will be selected by the Minister of Agriculture. Now, in the current ordinance, which I think is a fantastic piece of legislative work, I mean, go back to 1947, the founding fathers did a fantastic job. It provides for farmers to elect 6 representatives and for the government to provide 3 representatives. The ordinance prescribed the criteria of those representatives, but unfortunately, over the years, those criteria have not been held on to. So we all kinds of people appearing on the boards and not making a significant contribution as they ought to. But I agree with the caller, bring these stakeholders together.
Back to the phone line. Good morning.
Hello, good morning, Blossom. And Dr. Fletcher, that's a very, very well researched and thoughtful presentation. I always thought that there was a third suggestion, and I think you have nailed it. This is the only way we can see some fruits born for the farmers. I think the aspect of there has been ups in the financial income that has happened in the past. I don't think that is something new. So I think that your suggestion is one of the best that I've heard, as the first caller said. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, caller. Mr. Fletcher, you are getting kudos for the way you are articulating what you are saying. I have some cosigns on WhatsApp and Facebook. So I just thought I'd share that with you. Let's go back to the phone lines. Good morning.
Yes, Citizen Welsh, good morning. Greetings and greetings to your guest, Mr. Stephen Fletcher. Citizen Welsh, I joined the others caller, the previous caller, on congratulating the young man, and I say young man because he sounds younger than I am, on that presentation. There's absolutely no doubt about it that he has researched his material. Are you listening, Mr. Fletcher? I hope you are, because I don't flatter people, you hear me? So when I give thumbs up, you're getting a good thumbs up. And I agree with you. You made a statement that's rather enlightening. You said it must be farmer-driven, or led, if the correct word, but facilitated by government. I think this is the approach. The government, listen, the government of Grenada can't even manage their own statutory body. They want to tell people how to run their own private business. The farmers of this country, may God bless them all, to continue producing, are the owners of the means of production. Some of them afraid to hear that term, Yeah. Brothers and sisters, therefore, don't let your tete out of your own mouth so that the government can facilitate the placing in of the middlemen contact. Remember that the middlemen to drain you, to bleed you. Don't permit it. Listen to Mr. Fletcher. Think twice. Seek your rights and maintain the ownership of what is yours, so that coordinatedly and in synergy you can help the development of our little country. Admit that there are certain shortcomings which you have to correct. Go on and do what you have to do, but don't let loose your tete. You hear me? Have a nice day with you, Citizen Welsh.
Thank you, Citizen Rollo. You do the same. Dr. Fletcher?
Thank you very much, Citizen Rollo, for your compliments. I know you're a very well thought of person, very sober and very objective. So I thank you very much for your comments.
Let me make sure there are no comments or questions on the social media before I go back to the phone lines. Somebody on WhatsApp says, I think this is a very big project. Is there project framework and project management team that is working at this?
I am not aware of any project management team so that is engaged. It's a major issue, I agree. And, the GCNE and COCO and so on needs to put in place a team of expertise to help them go through this very challenging period.
All right, back to the phone line. Good morning.
Yeah, good morning, Blossom, and good morning to you, to Stephen Fletcher, your most esteemed and distinguished son of the soil. Wow. I don't have a comment. I can't find words to describe his presentation. It is so, I don't know what to say. I'm lost for words. And I really wish that those in authority would listen to Stephen Fletcher. He is thorough. He just knows what he's talking about. He knows what he's talking about, and he has the industry at heart, because this is Grenada's black gold. And if we put it in the hands of people who are not capable, if we put it in the hands of people who just want a few at the top to benefit and not the farmers would not be able to benefit, we don't want that. When you look at the rural economy, could you imagine the cycle of poverty? This nutmeg is an elevation to poverty, and so that industry is critical, and we have to ensure that we don't put it in the hands of a few people, and that our benefits go to the farmers and to the economy. And so, your esteemed guest, you couldn't hit the nail on the head. You're doing a fantastic job, and I really wish that the government could have an audience with you and listen to you. Keith Mitchell, listen to Fletcher. This is about the country that we have to benefit from, and it's an important industry. We cannot afford to play with Grenada's black gold. Listen to Dr. Fletcher, Keith Mitchell. And I want you to make a presentation to the cabinet and put some sense in their head, because the government cannot have this kind of a high-handed attitude. It has to be a partnership between all persons, all stakeholders. You just can't come and dictate to me what to do with the natural resources of my country. You're out of order. Listen to him. You're doing a great job, and like I say, I hope that this program, that they put it in the pipe and smoke it, that it is too critical and it will affect the livelihoods of the rural economy and the farmers.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you very much. Mr. Fletcher?
Yes, let me again thank the caller for the comments. And her comments along with Mr. Rollos remind me of this very important point that I think we need to look at. We need to ask ourselves, who are the drivers of the liberalization of this market and why? And who are the beneficiaries of it? And, it's important for us to drive that, because at the end of the day, we have to ask ourselves, who would this benefit? Okay? So we can understand to a large degree that this liberalization of the market have been driven by two sets of factors. External factors, which is issues arising out of the Washington consensus view of the world. Because remember, Blossom, prior to the 1992 or so collapse of the Berlin Wall, the world were on two ideologies. We had one driven by private sector, as represented by the price capitalism. We had another developed by socialism and socialist thought, which talked much more about community benefits of what's happening. In fact, the cooperative animal that has developed is part of that thought process of distributing wealth to a larger section of the population rather than a few. The cooperative movement was in response to the dire need to protect the poor and vulnerable who didn't have a voice. GCNA provided a voice for the small farmer. When thousands of farmers gathered in Queen's Park, now our national stadium, on the 3rd of March, 1942, and demanded and passed the resolution for the formation of the GCNA, that was something to be had. So we have to do this. They own the means of production. Back to Mr. Rollo's point, Citizen Rollo, sorry. They own the means of production. They therefore must be the beneficiaries of that ownership. However, they also need to recognize that the survival of Grenada, the economic buoyancy of Grenada, also depends on this very important industry. And this is my conclusion and my arrival at the point of this new generation cooperative model came out of deep study and looking at all the financial data available to me at the time from 1990, looking at the bounces. The other thing that's driving the change, Blossom, that we must not lose sight of, are the internal factors within the industry itself that is now calling for changes. And let me hasten to add here, if these associations fail to change, they will go into extinction. They must change. And internally, we have a number of issues to contend with. One, low production and low productivity. Since Hurricane Ivan, we have not been able to get our production up in any significant measure right now. As a consequence of that, we are now number 9 exporter in the world from number 2. Could you imagine? In 1992-93, we sat with the world's largest producer, we were the world's second largest producer. We negotiated a global cartel, right, arrangement that failed. Now, there are many reasons why it failed, right? But this is another topic for another discussion. We also have the issue of equity constrained by the GCNA. We have the issue of the absence of value added. But we also have this fundamental issue, which is at the core of some of the difficulties of GCNA. Two issues. One, the large payout to farmers every year, where the farmers say, give me all my money and vex with me, right? They don't want to retain anything. But part of the reason why they want all the money is distrust. And the current approach by the government regarding the 2020 bill is further deepening that mistrust of farmers in their association and in their major shareholder. The fear that at any time government could step in and take control. It happened in the 1970s, when Mr. Fisher Archibald, who was then chairman of the board of directors of the GCNA, and his board decided to move the savings from GCNA, from our banks here, and put it in Barbados to save it from the government of the day putting hands on it, it was alleged. So we have this issue of the resource management of the GCNA. We also have the issue of the absence of focus, clinical focus on where we want the industry to be. Now, let me give this other view. We cannot in any way invest in the manufacturing plants that is required to produce the high value added items that come from nutmeg. We must remember, nutmeg is not like bananas where you could go in a shop and buy a nutmeg and start eating it, right? It's not a peanut, okay? Nutmeg is used to process different chemical composition, and that chemical that comes out of nutmeg is used in various industries, including military, food, and so on and so forth. Now, why is it that GCNA cannot come up with the idea of forming joint ventures with companies out there in Europe, in the US, that are involved in the high value use of our commodity? Why is it, for example, we could not let us license? Now listen, KFC has a franchise here in Grenada and all over the world. They give you a license which says you are licensed to produce KFC and do it according to this layout and structure and format. Why can't we license the production of nutmegs with other parts of the world? Can we not consider or fathom the thought of, in fact, licensing the production of nutmegs in certain African countries, in Latin American countries? Let's do South-South cooperation. We have the product, they have the landmass, right? So let us get into arrangement. Let us be outside of that box and become creative for the good of Grenada, Carriacou, and Pitty-Matney, for the good of farmers, for the good of every household, for the good of a community that wants to be seen a strong, prosperous, healthy, wealthy nation. George Brisson in 1974 wrote the Grenada Black Gold. Now, at the time, gold was seen as the be-all and end-it-all of the world. Everybody was investing in gold. It was what was generating monies and so on. That has changed significantly in terms of gold. But the point that George Brisson was making, which we still need to make, is that nutmeg crop gives us the best opportunity to improve the quality of life of our people. And let us not let it pass. Let us not turn our backs on it.
Somebody on WhatsApp has asked, are you aware if government officially presented the proposal to GCNA and GCA, or is it still in the draft phase?
I am not aware. I'm only speaking on what is available in the public space.
Okay. And somebody else is asking that if you can probably explain the word liberalization as used by government and what it's mentioned in that case.
Sorry, can you just repeat?
Explain what liberalization of the industries or the sectors would mean, or what it means.
Okay, great. Liberalization, again, is a drawback from the 1990s, when a significant part of the world had owned assets and government has had regulations over many things, right? The performance of industries, how firms operate, and so on. What liberalization does is to remove government control and government regulations from industry. In other words, no more regulation, do it as you want, do it as you please yourself, make money, if you want, who cannot make money, well, they survive by whatever means possible. So liberalization is fundamentally the removal of any kind of regulatory efforts, any laws and so on regarding how things work, how a firm operates, or how an industry operates. When you liberalize the nutmeg market, for example, what you're aiming to do is to have many private sector persons purchasing nutmegs and exporting the same nutmeg. So no longer would you have one body responsible for the purchase and exports of nutmeg, but you have many players, you have multiple players involved. Now what that means, in a small economy like this, with many small producers competing for purchase and export of nutmegs, it will lead to downward pressure on prices. The farmer, the individual household will not benefit. In fact, Mrs. Welch, very good question from that caller. Very good question. The experience of the United States agricultural sector, when there was some privatization and mergers taking place in the industry, I have it somewhere. I think it was in Iowa or some other state. The farmer household income declined by as much as 31%. So we are likely to see a serious decrease in household income, because we know that in our country, that no matter what job most of us hold, whether we are a medical doctor, we are a professor, whatever, we also own nutmeg lands. Miss Narlene Joseph, for example, professor at St. George's University, but she's a large nutmeg farmer. I know lawyers, magistrate, judges, who are also large nutmeg farmers. Income is going to decline, and it's going to affect the distribution of income throughout the economy. It will affect the downward spend, because if income dries up, you decide, you know what, I'm going to wash my car for myself. I'm going to cut my grass, my lawn for myself. I'm going to reduce my expenditure. And it will be very, in fact, government may lose revenue. Our national treasury may lose revenue if we were to go that route, because the individual farmer and the individual household will not have that spend.
Dr. Fletcher, as we wrap up this morning, let me ask, have you been contacted to weigh in on this merger or the moving forward for either associations by either parties, whether it's by government or by the associations? Have you been contacted to weigh in?
Okay, let me say, I have made myself available. I have, in fact, I can tell you this, I've written to both organizations indicating my willingness to make myself available. In fact, I have a meeting scheduled probably sometime this week with them. I do not know what would be the outcome of it, but over the years, Ms. Welch, I have consistently indicated my willingness to be of help to this country and to the sector. I have spent many years of my life studying the GCNA. I've done my doctorate on the GCNA. I have done my master's on the impact of the single European market and Caribbean traditional trade, where I looked specifically at the banana industry then. The banana went into total demise. I warned about that possibility, and it happened. So I'm saying this to say that my very existence here in my homeland, the land of my birth, is to make my skills and talent available to the people of this country in whatever form that the powers that be, whether it's government, private sector, cooperative sector. I am willing to make my skills and talent available.
Thank you very much, Dr. Fletcher. We appreciate it. And on behalf of the viewers and listeners, I know a lot of them are praising you, and thank you so much for your insight into this entire situation. Thank you for sharing it with us this morning.
Thank you very much for having me, and I hope that we can come to an amicable solution to this merger and liberalization issue. And whatever decision we take it in the interest of the country.
Fingers crossed.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. That was Dr. Stephen Fletcher sharing his thoughts, ideas as in relation to the impending merger of the Grenada Nutmeg Association or Cooperative Nutmeg Association and the Grenada Cocoa Association. We thank him once again. Just as a note, beyond the headlines tonight the guests will be 4 farmers. They will be the guest on Beyond the Headlines tonight, to be hosted by Mrs. Odette Campbell. Beyond the Headlines starts at 8:35 p.m. on channel 7, 11, and 20. And of course, it will be carried live on the website, the YouTube channel, and the Facebook page. So stay tuned for that, where 4 farmers will weigh in their thoughts on the merger or the proposed merger of the 2 associations. Thank you, viewers and listeners, for being such wonderful audience members. Thank you for participating. Have yourselves a productive Monday. I'll be back with you tomorrow, God willing. Joseph is up next with Mid Morning Buzz. Have yourselves a good day.